I'm Tonny Rutakirwa, based in London, UK, and I'm a published author, 33 books as of March 2023.
Wait, did you say 33 books?
That's right.
33 books. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So my journey began more than 10 years ago in Uganda, Kampala, Uganda. And it was a complicated journey because no one believed at that age when I first published my book, when I first finished my manuscript, I was 16, and no one believed anyone had anything to offer at that age. So it was an uphill journey that had to be, with very many bottlenecks that had to be worked on, and that some of which still have to be worked on. So I believe by the end of this session, we'll cover a few of those things. And I look forward to hearing from the other panelists and from the guests.
Thank you very much, Tony. Next, we'll call Samantha. We call you Sam or Samantha?
Sam is fine. Can you hear me okay?
Sam, hi. Yes. Hi, Sam. Good. How are you?
I'm good, Bitten. Thank you for inviting me here today. So I start. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Samantha. You can call me Sam, but my full name is Samantha Rumbidzai Vazhure. I'm a Zimbabwean author and publisher based in Wales, the United Kingdom. And I would say my writing journey has been ongoing for a while, but I started sort of writing to publish around 2019, 2020. And I established Canadian Hearts, which is the name of my publishing company, in around April 2020. So I'll be talking a lot more about that later. I'll talk you through the books that I've worked on, the books I've published, and some of the things I've experienced through my my writing journey. I don't know if that's enough, or do you want me to carry on?
No, that will do for now. But just, you mentioned you started to write to publish just more recently. Before that, when did you write?
Well, you know what? I think I've always written. I journal a lot, on my phone, in diaries and stuff. And when I was a lot younger in high school, I wrote, and I won the Randall's National Essay Competition. I don't know whether that rings a bell to some people or not, but there was this essay competition in Zimbabwe at the time, and I was sort of, I think I was in Form 4. So I won the regional prize for Mashingo in 1997. So, and it's not something I'd ever really thought about or given much weight to. But now that I'm a sort of professional writer or published author, I look back at that and think, oh, so I have been writing for a while, but at the time I didn't really think of myself as a writer. It was just something I was doing. And, I've always written poetry as well. But again, because I wasn't publishing it, I never ever thought of myself as a writer. I just wrote things in my phone or in my diary and stuff like that. So I think I have been writing for a while, but it's not something I'd ever thought was serious or anything I thought was even worth mentioning. But now when I look back, I think, I think I have been writing for a while now. But
yeah. No, I just asked that to get that out of the way, because our community is full of people who write, who maybe haven't thought of publishing and not doing that. So I just wanted to see that it's part of that journey as well. It happens. Things will happen, they happen. And just to have that inspiration, like, move from that step, get published. What's stopping you?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And next, let's see, we have Charles. Charles, are you on the line?
Thank you very much. Yes, I am.
Yes, awesome.
With books started many years ago while I was still a child. And professionally, I'm a librarian. I worked with the National Library of Uganda for some time. And one of the most interesting things I did was a digital book This was in the early 2000s. The idea was a van that had computers on board and a satellite access to internet that would move around schools to give children access to interesting storybooks from around the world. It was a very interesting project that we did at that time. Currently, I am many things. I run the Uganda Reproduction Rights Organization, which is a collecting society that's about copyright. I'm the executive director of that organization, and we protect the rights or copyright of writers and publishers, both locally within Uganda and from around the world. I'm also the executive director of the National Book Trust of Uganda, which was set up to promote authorship, publishing, and the culture of reading within Uganda. And I'm vice chairman of the National Culture Forum, which brings together all creatives from across all the domains of art and culture for us to have one voice in moving public policy and the different things, markets and so on, the things that concern creatives that include writers, publishers, but also the other side of the creative sector.
Thank you very much, Charles. You've got so many heads. I'm sure you've got some interesting things to share with us. So you'll come back a bit later on and just give us a bit more in depth. And I hope you also tell us about how to protect ourselves, because that's a concern. It's a very serious concern on piracy and those kind of things. I hope you are going to share a bit on that. And next, who else do we have? Janan, can you just pop up for a little bit just to say hello?
Okay. Just give me a minute.
Yeah, we can hear you. Hi, yes.
Hi, Biton, and greetings to our panelists and our guests and all viewers who have joined. I'm called Janan Eyochu. I work with the British Council as an arts officer. So British Council is the cultural arm of the UK government. And I'll share a little bit more how we engage or work with creatives. And I personally am so passionate about working with creatives. So I'll share a little bit more when opportunity arises. But I'm really glad to be here and listening to this conversation.
Thank you very much. Quick question. Do you read?
Yes, I do. Of late.
What kind of books are you into? Like, this is personal, not one on the other. Like, yeah, what do you do?
Sorry?
I said, what do you read? Your type of books, genre is, what's the last thing you read?
I think of fictional novels.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you very much. On to Rachel. We're just going to get into her presentation. Rachel, we missed you when we were going around the first time.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. Hi, Vita.
Hi, yes. Hi, how are you?
Very well, very well. Good to be here. Well, my name is Rachael Kizza, and I work with the African Writers Trust. I will talk more about it in the presentation, but I love to read.
We're actually going into, you actually have the time where
okay,
yeah, we'll just go into it. We're starting with,
all right.
with you. Yeah.
Okay.
You have the great opportunity of introducing yourself and then just going into it.
Okay. All right. I guess I'll just go into that. So yes, I love to read. I love to write. I'm a blogger, and I think that's how I got into this community, the Afrobloggers community. And I work with the African Writers Trust. You can follow us on social media, of course, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Just look for African Writers Trust and you will see it. What does African Writers Trust do? We aim at bridging the divide between African writers and publishing professionals living on the continent and those living in the diaspora. And why do we do that? To bring them together, to promote synergies and collaborative learning. Really. That's what we do. And how do we do that? We do it through a number of ways. We have training workshops, we have mentoring workshops, we have reading and writing residencies, we have the International Writers Conference that happens every after 2 years, but we've not had it in the last years because of COVID, but hopefully next year we'll have it. And we also have what we call the manuscript assessment program. And I think because Biton asked me to speak about how does the work we do fit into the publishing ecosystem or the writing and publishing ecosystem. So because we work with African writers specifically, we have the various programs that I've mentioned, but for us here on the forum, if you're not able to be part of the training workshops, because most of them are physical, we have them in Uganda most of the times. We have them in Uganda, apart from last year when we had, please forgive the noise, it's that time of the weekend.
Well, it is the weekend, yeah.
Yeah, so we have most of them, we have them in Uganda. So if you would want to visit Uganda, that would be the right time to come visit the country and then interact with writing and publishing professionals through our different programs that we host. But I would like to interest you on one of the programs that I think can help you if you have a ready manuscript, or you want to really, you have a manuscript that's, you just need someone to look at it. I would direct you to a manuscript assessment program, which is designed specifically for people who are writing and they desire to publish. So with that program, our desire is that writers submit their manuscript at a fee, at a small fee. They submit their manuscript, and we have assessors who look at that manuscript and give feedback. They give feedback on the quality of writing, on the dialogue, basically on the elements of writing. And now it's fourth edition. We're now in the fourth edition. This year we'll be rolling out the fourth edition, a call for submissions, and it's open to all writers on the continent, African writers on the continent and those in the diaspora. And we've had success with that because we realize that many people have manuscripts, but they don't have people, professionals who can look at their manuscripts and give them the feedback that they need to take the manuscript to a whole new level. And I think when we met with Patricia, I don't think I told about this program, but anyway, in everything that we spoke about, it was all leading to that. So yes, the manuscript assessment program you can check out the website. I think I'll just put the link of African Writers Trust website in the comment section, so you can check it out and see the work that we've done, but also updates on the manuscript assessment program. So yeah, I think that's it. We've had success stories with that program. We've had 3 of some of the people who have submitted their manuscripts. 2 of them have been selected, or they got a literary agent who is representing them now, and one of them, his manuscript will be published next year, that's 2023, by Cassava Public Press. And we have one herself a literary agent, so her work will also be published, and then one who self-published last year by a US, he was published by a US publishing house. So yeah, that's a bit of what African Writers Trust does. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Quick question for you. I'm just curious, with the work you're doing and the writing you do personally, what do you think is the future for the African book industry?
Well, I think for starters, it's promising because we have more people writing, especially in Uganda. We have more people writing. We have more people willing to publish their books, but they're willing to also compete to international standards. Sorry, that's my fault. To international standards. So I think our future is promising, and if we put the right systems in place, then people will be able to publish books that are worth competing at the international level, because that's what I would really want to see. Many of our books compete at the international level, not just a few people that are publishing, but have everyone who is writing be able to compete at an international level.
Okay.
Yeah. So books with good editing, good everything.
Thank you very much. And then another, you mentioned the success stories, but roughly on a turnover for the 4 years you've been running your programs, On average, how many books do you come up with? Do you know?
Well, the African Writers Trust does not publish books. We don't publish books. We work with writers, put them in touch with the publishing professionals, and then people determine what they want to do with their books. I think one of the things that I would want to emphasize for us, because I believe everyone here is a writer or is into writing in one way or the other, is the fact that writing a book is quite difficult, and writing a book to get it to a level where it competes with the books that everyone is reading is even more gruesome. So that's why the training workshops for writers are very important, because as you write, then you will identify that I don't think I'm good with dialogue. I don't think I'm good with maybe setting. And so you figure out which part you're not good with so that you can improve that. And then there are workshops that are tailored towards specific things. So if you know you're not good at something, then you will look out for that program that's going to help you develop and grow in that area so that you better your craft as a whole. But yeah, we don't publish, but we work with writers to help them develop their craft. And with manuscript assessment, we have some of our assessors are publishers. So when they like a manuscript, then they may get in talks with the author and decide what to do with it. But we are not in that. The publishing we've done has been for anthologies, say a particular program and the end product is an anthology. And those I think has 3. We're working on the 4th one, but really that's it. We don't publish, but we help writers get to people who publish.
Okay, brilliant. I'm sure there are publishers somewhere in the background. One of our speakers is actually a publisher. I think they're taking notes. They should actually be in touch with you. Please put your details at the bottom so people can, for the site and everything. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. Next we go to Tony, the man with 33 books going on. And yeah, I want to know how's that working at 33 books. Okay. Yeah. Tony.
Yes, Beaton, thank you once again.
Yeah.
Well,
the floor is yours, Megan.
Sorry?
I said the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Well, the journey of 33 books started with just one. And when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I wrote my first book, which never got to be published because no one felt I had anything to offer. Yet I couldn't spell the word hippopotamus. So why would I have anything to offer at that age? It was a children's learner's dictionary. So that was the beginning of my publishing journey. Like one of the panelists said, I didn't identify myself as a writer at that time. I just loved doing it. I just found myself doing it. It was just a passion. But when it became professional was in 2006 rather. I was 16 years old, and I wrote my first book called Awaken the Financial Genius in You, which never got to be published because, which got to be published 2 years later, but for 2 years it wasn't published because of the bottlenecks in Uganda at that time. One was the quality of work, and because I identified with a certain level of excellence, which I couldn't find anywhere. And maybe a few things have improved right now. I would like to hear from Charles to see what has improved and what still needs to be worked on. So how this was resolved is I started my own publishing company called Tonny Publishing Press to publish not just my books, but those of other authors who were in a similar predicament. And that was the start of my publishing journey as both an author and a publisher. And so from 2010, when my first book was released that was 25th March 2010, I then started releasing a new book on my birthday every year as a way of giving back to society. And with 2020, that's 25th March, I started a new series. That was the Awaken series, a new series called the Ventura series. And this Ventura series was random ideas, random books. There were some children's books and some autobiographies, unauthorized autobiographies of people that had inspired me, like Kobe Bryant and the Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman. So this series was based on purely inspiration of what came at that particular moment. So it wasn't part of the Awaken series, which was a little bit standardized on my journey of the previous year towards that birthday. So that was the journey to those 33 books, so we look forward to having, I look forward to having a global tour and to engaging with other authors to see how we can actually make this industry, because this industry needs us to come together a little bit more to make it one. When you say I'm an author, sometimes people identify it as a second-class role, whereby you're not earning anything, or you're doing it part-time or for leisure. But we need to make it a kind of profession that actually is an earning profession, something you can do full-time. And that is where we come in. That is where my publishing company comes in, and the kind of initiatives we have in place to help authors and fellow publishers to build up this industry to a level whereby it can become an earning industry. And with global tours and book signings and quite a lot of things that we can discuss based on interest from the viewers. So one of the things, my all-time favorite quote was a quote from Linda Hill. Linda Hill was a Harvard professor who said that to be competitive today, you can't simply execute. You have to be able to innovate. And to get innovation, you need to create a culture of engagement of learning. And this culture of engagement of learning, you need three things. You need conflict, you need diversity, and you need agility. Now, this is what exactly is going to take the book publishing industry to that next level. The agility, the conflict, and the diversity. So how? We see, in comparison with the music industry, you see what conflict has done to raise the rates and the figures of and the popularity of musicians in that industry. We need the same in the publishing industry. We need something that gives a kick, that brings interest and attraction. Usually, sometimes I've met people who don't want to read or don't feel like reading because of purely interest and motivation. It hasn't kicked in the right way. So by solving that conflict bottleneck, we actually see a potential of having current published authors increase their earning 10x just from that alone, because people are curious. We are curious by nature. We want to know what's going on. So sometimes that would solve a very big problem, the conflict bit, the conflict bottleneck. So then we have the diversity and the agility. So the agility, we look at the publishing entry. Now at this point, there are a lot of entry barriers of entry for most authors that want to publish, especially their first book. One is the cost of entry. which is usually high, and 2 is the information. So let me give a difference between the Ugandan and the UK industry. In Uganda, when I wanted to publish my first book, everything was money, from editing to layout and design, to cover designs, of which quality was not to international standards. Now, in the UK, there were a number of platforms where you could get published at almost zero cost, get your audiobook out at almost zero cost, whereby, for example, with platforms like Audible, SCX, where you get fellow narrators to narrate your book based on a share program of profits after sales. So, and yet, the audiobook industry is a very promising one because of the interest of people that want to listen to the book rather than read the book, to listen to a book in their car or in their homes or on the go. And this hasn't been well utilized. These platforms haven't been well utilized. So this is a way into that. So I hope my presentation has covered the key points of interest. So back to you, Beaton, unless there are a few other questions. That is my submission.
Agility, conflict, and what's the other one? Diversity. I was taking notes.
Right.
And how
Right.
People are very curious beings. So I guess that's one of the things that drives us. And you mentioned how over the UK, there's platforms which make it easy for you to be able to do that. What do you think we need to do as Africans for us to have platforms like that?
Well, it starts with having libraries, inclusive libraries that are community-based, that are, you go to and you can have a cup of coffee, you can have a few meetings, you can have discussion groups. Now, these discussion groups based on your interests and based on, that's the starting point. So once that has achieved and people have begun, the mentality of people has begun to go to, not looking at a book as a very serious thing, but as something of leisure, something fun, something you do, you enjoy your time while doing it.
Yes. I definitely say
an alternative to music, just like you would listen to music or play a video. That's how you should feel reading a book. It should be that engaging. It should be that captivating. It should be that mind-boggling. So that's the starting point. And once that has been done, it means you've created markets, you've created an industry. And then the next step would be to remove the bottlenecks and that stop authors from actually publishing their works. Because the biggest bottleneck right now is the financial one. Most people are not willing to invest that much into publishing a book when they're not sure they would actually get it back. And unless it's for passion, unless someone has, so those are the first two starting points.
Those are good starting points. Yes. So yeah, we need to come together and having spaces like this conversation we're having, we're actually kickstarting this because I'm sure people will be just communicating. The people who are going to reach out to you. Oh, by the way, please put your details in the chat for people who want to contact with you to see if there's ways they can work with you. This is also what we do with these meetings. We're just facilitating dialogue and conversations with people, similar interest people who can help you to get to a next level. And with that, we're going to go to our next guest, Samantha, who's also taken this journey and has taken that further step of just not just writing your book, but helping others have their books out there.
Thank you, Beaton.
Yes.
Hi. So yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm a writer and I'm a publisher as well. And so what I'll do is I'll talk you through my journey. I'll talk you through the books I've worked on and hopefully that will inspire somebody to kind of, if they were stalling or procrastinating, hopefully it will encourage someone to just get on with it and finish writing that book, maybe even get into publishing as well if they would like to. So my journey started with a poetry collection called Zvadzugwa Msango. So it's actually, I'm a bilingual author and I write in English and I write in my native Shona as well, specifically the Karanga dialect, which is the one we use where I come from in Zimbabwe. So Zvadzugwa Msango is a collection of about, I think, 75 poems. And I think when I started writing this collection, it was really sort of a cathartic self-discovery process where I didn't really have the intention of publishing at the time, but I just wanted to maybe self-heal. And writing in my native language was one of those things that helped me because I've lived in the UK for over 20 years. And I think I just felt like I wanted to get back in touch with my roots. So it was really important for me to do something symbolic, to sort of maybe tick that box. And I suppose I had a little bit of history with the Shona language anyway. I studied Shona at A level in Zimbabwe, and I had an A in Shona. So it's a subject I really enjoyed. And I think I'd always, maybe at a subconscious level, felt that I'd wasted that A, I'd wasted the subject, I'd wasted my time. And I think for me, it was like, oh, at least, maybe I should write something in Shona. So I was writing, I'd been writing the poems anyway, without the intention of publishing. And one of the things that actually influenced my writing in Shona was that I listened to a lot of Zimbabwean music, again, as a way of connecting with my roots. I particularly love Zimbabwean dancehall music because I feel like it's very poetic. So that was one of the that was one of the things that encouraged me to write in Shona, actually. So I got Zvadzugwa Msango out and then thought that, okay, this dialect and even the Shona language is not widely spoken, but I wanted the messages in the collection to be kind of read widely. So Zvadzugwa Msango actually means uprooted from your natural habitat. So I decided to translate Zvadzugwa Msango to uprooted. So it's the exact collection of poems, 75 poems that are in Zvadzugwa Msango. I decided to translate them into English so that the poems could be more accessible globally. And the collection is really about the experiences of immigrants living away from their countries of origin. So, the poems talk to the celebrations and some of the maybe issues and celebrations experienced by immigrants globally. So they're happy poems, they're sad poems, but generally covering some of the things people who live away from their countries of origin experience. And so while I was writing these two books, I was also drafting my novel, Painting a Mirage, and I got uprooted and Zvadzugwa Msango published in, I think, June and July of 2020. And at the same time, I was still working on my debut novel, Painting a Mirage, which is the first of a trilogy. So, again, Painting a Mirage is, it's a family drama about a girl who grew up in a dysfunctional family set up in Zimbabwe. Then she moves to the UK, and then I think the process of kind of moving away from that dysfunction makes her aware of where she's come from and how she sort of applies herself to a new environment in the UK. So it talks to a lot of cultural, religious, and other issues that may be viewed as toxic by some people, but not others. So it just talks to a lot of controversial issues that we come across a lot in this day and age where we've got people who are based at home who think, oh, this is our culture, we will not change this. And then you've got people who've moved abroad who feel that some of the cultures from back home may be seen as toxic and etc. So so this was my first novel. So I think for me, having released 3 books in 1 year, I suffered burnout or exhaustion And I wanted to take a break from writing, but I didn't want to take a break from the book and the publishing world. And in fact, maybe what I forgot to mention was that when I wrote Radzuko Msango, initially I hadn't thought of publishing it, but when I did think of publishing it, I came across so many challenges, one of which was that the likes of Amazon, I wanted to when I decided to publish, I was going to just self-publish. Then I discovered, after completing and editing the whole manuscript, that Amazon no longer, or maybe never did, publish books in Shona. So quite a few publishers will have a list of languages that they publish, and they're only probably 30 or 40, and of course we have thousands and thousands of languages across the world. So obviously Shona wasn't on there, and I had to research how I could get my book out there using the proper channels. So I came across a distributor that would allow me to publish the book in Shona if I did it through a publishing company. So that's actually what motivated me to establish my publishing company. It's because I wanted to publish Radzuko Msango. So I established Kanilenat initially just to publish my own books. So when I then went through the little burnout, so I got 3 books out and I was tired, but I wanted to continue with the publishing. I then decided that, okay, with all the issues or hurdles I came across, if I'm experiencing this and I'm based in the UK where I have sort of access to resources, what about the people back home? They must be going through even worse hurdles, or experiencing worse hurdles than I am. So I want to do something to help people who have the potential to write. So I thought of compiling an anthology. Now, one of the things I do is I advocate quite a lot of causes, gender equality, for example, the welfare of immigrants and stuff like that. So my first anthology project was Turquoise Dreams, where I compiled 29 short stories by Zimbabwean women, by 10 Zimbabwean women. So this is an anthology that has stories talking to the experiences of women in modern day Southern Africa. And a lot of these women, all of them had never been published before, but they're women who had won essay competitions. Some of them are bloggers. They all had some sort of writing experience, and that's how I was actually able to find them. So because I run the publishing house pretty much on my own, I couldn't afford to sort of make an announcement on social media, for example, that, I'm looking for women writers from Zimbabwe who can contribute to this, because I didn't think I'd be able to deal with, floods and floods of short stories. I wouldn't be able to maybe vet them equitably. So it was by invitation. I had to approach different writers that I could see on their social media profiles that they had some writing experience, and I would kind of go and look at their blogs or look at other things they'd written and kind of vet their writing abilities that way. And then I would approach them and ask them if they were interested in contributing to this anthology. So that was quite an interesting experience. And it birthed the first anthology I compiled. And then following that, there was also, after I did Turquoise Dreams, I published a collection of poems called Before the Next Song by Mapfumo Clement Chiota. Now, this one it's a very good collection of poems, and it actually is an interesting story. So this book was actually an A-level set book in Zimbabwe that was previously published by one of the traditional publishing houses in Zimbabwe that went bust. So the book went out of print and was just no longer available. And the poet or the author got in touch with me to see if I would be able to republish it. So, we kind of had to sort of re-edit it, make a few changes, redesign the cover, and go through the sort of normal publishing process. But it was quite refreshing for me to be able to help someone who had previously been published in Zimbabwe by one of the major traditional publishing houses, and their book had just disappeared into nothingness because of how the publishing industry has become in Zimbabwe. So that's that story. And then around the same time, I'd also started working with an author called Vaisinganga. Unfortunately, I don't have his book at the moment, but he wrote a story called Once Upon a Time. And he had been struggling to find a publisher as well. And his story is kind of set in pre-colonial Zimbabwe with some very interesting cultural concepts that were kind of unfamiliar to me because, you know, they're things I just wasn't aware of. So it's almost like a historical fiction novel. And I was very interested in it because of, you know, because of the genre it was, and also because it explored Karanga cultures, which and I'm of Karanga origin, so it was quite an interesting project to get involved in. It was quite challenging as well because Vice had written his whole novel on WhatsApp. So without a word processor, I had to kind of copy and paste his whole manuscript, around, you know, almost 50,000 words, onto Word, and then work on it that way. And because he didn't have a word processor, we couldn't go through the normal editing process whereby you know, I kind of mark up the document and I put my comments in, and then the author replies to them or fixes them. That didn't happen. I almost had to do it for him. So that was quite a process, but we got there in the end, and it was quite fulfilling to be able to get a book out, having gone through that process with him. And while I'm there, I think just to maybe talk about editing a little bit. So obviously, you know, anyone who knows about books knows that they have to be edited. So one of the things I spend a lot of my time doing is editing manuscripts, and even doing the manuscript assessment. I get approached by quite a lot of people who want their books published, and obviously, before I can decide whether to publish them or not, I have to read their stories or I have to read their poems. So I spend a lot of time reading. So I mean, I've done some informal editing courses, but then I think I also have quite a lot of transferable skills that I bring from my formal line of work. So I'm not just a writer and publisher. This is a side gig. What I actually do for a living is I'm a regulatory consultant or a regulatory lawyer, and I work in financial services. So in my normal line of work, I spend a lot of time reading long, boring documents or drafting them. And challenging sort of board level people on what's in those documents. So I'm quite used to assessing, you know, the long, tedious documents and challenging them and questioning where things don't add up and all that stuff, and maybe recommending things that should be in there. So in a way, you could argue that is actually an editor's job in a way. So that's a transferable skill I brought into publishing. So I think, and I actually find that the editing and publishing is slightly better, because when you're reading stories and poems or whatever, they're more enjoyable reads than, you know, sort of contracts and policies and procedures. So I brought that experience with me into publishing. And also, I think just the nature of the environment I work formally, they're very sort of fast-paced investment banks and things like that. So I'm very used to working on very difficult and complex things very quickly, because anyone who knows anything about that industry will tell you that, you know, things that might take maybe an ordinary person a few months to do sometimes have to be done in a day. So, I mean, I've had a few people kind of commenting that, oh, you know, you've done this so quickly. How are you doing all this so quickly? It's because I'm used to it. I'm used to working under pressure and, you know, going a few nights or weeks with very little sleep. So that's how I've been managing to do it. So I think, so after Vice's novel called Once Upon a Time, I also worked with Tinatwe Maka on her debut novel called The Men I've Hated. So interestingly, Tinatwe was actually one of the writers who contributed to Turquoise Dreams, the anthology. And she had been working on her own full-length manuscripts. And because I'd already worked with her and I knew her quality of work, it was quite easy for me to acquire her book, The Men I've Hated, which is about so Tinatwe is a radical feminist. Some of you may be familiar with her work on social media. She's a lawyer as well. So in the story, you know, she talks about a journey through relationships with men from childhood to adulthood. And it's got quite a, you know, for anyone who's interested in gender equality and feminism, this is a very good book to have a look at. And then after Tinatwe's book, I decided to compile another anthology. So, and that one's called Brilliance of Hope. So with Brilliance of Hope, I wanted to address one of the matters I advocate, which is the welfare of immigrants. And as an immigrant myself, I actually contributed 2 short stories to Brilliance of Hope. There are, I think, 43 stories in this collection by 15 writers of varying experience. Some of the writers in here have been traditionally published. Some of them have published in online literary journals, and some of them had not been published before. But it's a really great anthology that talks to the experiences of Zimbabweans in the diaspora, and I think this was probably one of the best projects, or one of the ones I enjoyed the most, because I could relate to the stories that were in the book, and I think I'd also kind of developed some confidence in what I was doing. I'd started networking and working with other creatives as well in the industry. So, I mean, although I'm an editor myself, all of the books I publish are edited by at least 2 people. So I've established relationships with other editors and other creatives who better read the books and whatever. So I think by the time I got to this book, I was more confident of the things I was doing. So this was quite an enjoyable project for me. And then following Brilliance of Hope came, so this was in September last year. And then I started working with Zikamai Chando. So he's a poet who is originally from Gweru, Zimbabwe. And I had read quite a few of his poems, amazing poems that were published in literary online magazines and journals. And I actually invited him. I approached him to say, listen, I really love your poems. Would you be interested in publishing a collection? And luckily, he was up for it, and he apparently had 400 poems just sitting about that he hadn't really thought about publishing. So so he put together a collection called Cremation of the Scarecrow, and this was published in January this year. Early February this year actually, but we had been working on the collection since late last year, around the time I just got Brilliance of Hope out of the way. So this is one of the latest books that have come out, and the last one I published is Lazarus Panashe Nyagwambo. He's a Zimbabwean writer as well, and this is a collection of short stories called A Hole in the Air. So again, I'd worked with Lazarus in Brilliance of Hope. Lazarus contributed to Brilliance of Hope, and I had seen a lot of his short stories in online literary magazines. And when I was looking for authors or writers to contribute to Brilliance of Hope, I had approached him to ask if he would be interested in writing or contributing to it, which he agreed to. So he also had a collection of stories that he was ready to publish, and that's how this book came about. Now, in addition to publishing all of these guys and these books, I've also now started working with other authors who self-published their books, but wanted me to distribute their books globally. So if you might be familiar with Sunyati, so I'm distributing, Kanile Hart is distributing Sunyati's The Polygamist globally. And I have also got a distribution agreement with Kosi Ngube for her memoir called The 100 Letters I'll Never Send. So so I mean, that's basically what I've been up to. I like to sort of just think of myself as kind of an ordinary person doing ordinary things, and most of the able to do are really just mostly self-taught or through networking. I've made really great relationships with other creatives who impart their knowledge and advice, and I've just grown day by day that way. And that's it. So if you have any questions, fire away.
Yeah, I think we're just going to skip the questions just for now and jump to the next person. And then when we're done, hopefully we can now have like cohesive questions for everybody. So we're going to thank you very much, Samantha. And you're so
Alright.
not an ordinary person doing ordinary things. These are extraordinary things. And please put those in the chat so people can reach out to you and talk about. I'm sure there are people who have chats, conversations to do with you after your presentation. I have questions too. I'm sure people have questions and they want to reach out. So put your details on, people get hold of you. Put that in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Now we're going to move forwards to Charles. Charles, are you with us? And Charles, I'm going to put you on the spot for the question, which is in the chat. Like, how can the writing industry contribute towards the rebranding the African continent? And since you're the man with the many hats, who's in so many positions, I think you've seen the influence of how what we do plays out. Charles, are you on the call? I can see Charles.
I am.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to Afrobloggers and people interested in writing and publishing of literary works, either on digital platforms or in the analog books and journals and so on. It's really a real pleasure for me to be here. Many years ago, a friend of mine presented a paper where she said that Africa was a silent continent. Many of us know past. Some people used to refer to Africa as the dark continent. Not dark because us Africans are kind of dark, black, but dark in the sense that not much was actually known about the continent. So my friend wrote a paper about Africa, the silent continent. And the reason for her paper was that when she looked at the global statistics of how much we are publishing, how much writing was happening on the continent, at that time, we're contributing about 0.002% to global knowledge, global publications, and 0.002%. When you round it off to the nearest tenth is like what, 0%. So it means we're actually contributing 0%. The rest of the world could as well have gone ahead without us. And maybe that is happening. I'm happy that these conversations are beginning to happen, or they have been happening for the last few years. And we should be able to change the narrative about Africans writing or Africans not writing, Africans reading or Africans not reading, so that, we change this narrative. And I think that these conversations have a sway, they have meaning in terms of ensuring that Africans change and we get on the global path to creating more knowledge and more publications. We have a lot to write about. Many of us know that Africa is ethnically very diverse, and we have a lot of cultural stories that we can tell to the world. I'm sure the world is itching to hear these stories from our cultures. A few of the stories that have broken out through the different channels, for instance, films and so on. Some of the films, for instance, about African stories have become big on the world stage. And I believe about our cultures, and so books could as well become bestsellers globally, because I'm sure the world is looking out for new stories. They are looking out for things that we know about our cultures, about Africa, and so on. So the culture of writing is very, very important for us as Africans. From where I sit, in these years, I really see an improvement in terms of our writing. I know that many Africans are doing their level best to actually write fiction, poetry, and so on. And some of these works have actually broken onto, they have made records on the world stage. Some of our writers have won different awards, if we are to go by awards as a measure of success. But also, I'm aware that a lot of our books are being taught at universities, both within Africa and out of Africa. That is very encouraging. We look forward to a time where African writers can publish and have their books widely distributed within Africa, but also across the entire world. so that as Africans, you know, we can be able to influence the world, you know, the thinking, but also change the narrative about Africa. Because one of the narratives is what I started with, that, you know, Africa is a silent continent because so little was coming out of Africa. And as a matter of concern, there are many initiatives that have been set up to ensure that, you know, things change for the best. I'd like to say that I'm happy with the people that are writing, both in the colonial languages, but also in our African languages, and especially in the African languages, because if we don't write in those languages, then they will disappear eventually. And in one of my hearts, where I work with the people from the performing arts and so on, we're happy, for instance, that, you know, African music, for example, has taken the global stage, and some of it is in the African languages. Or African films, some of them have taken the global stage because some of them are in the African languages. But most important, we have a market of 1.2 billion people. It makes sense for us to write in African languages as well as the colonial languages, so that we can feed that market with enough books. One of my concerns actually about African writing is that we are not getting enough books, because Africans that read really want enough books from which to make choices of what they would want to read. And most of the time in many countries, we're not having a diversity of novels, poetry, or children's books, and so on. And we need to do something about this issue, so that we can produce enough books to feed the 1.2 billion people that live on the continent, leave alone those in the diaspora, but also the non-Africans that are interested in African stories. In where I come from, in Uganda, currently we are writing in 30 local languages, including English and Kiswahili. And the reason for this is because the 30 local languages are actually languages of instruction in lower primary. Now that was a major breakthrough when they said that, okay, we could use the local languages as languages of instruction in schools. Then it opened the market for writers of textbooks, you know, materials that are curriculum oriented, but also writers of readers that children can read so that they can master better their languages and actually learn a lot of things about their cultures. I hope that many other African countries probably adopting this approach of having the curriculum delivered in the local languages, because it's one way that we can expand the languages in which we write, but also the market, because some of the people will never read English or Portuguese or French. Some of them would be very pleased to read their local languages. In the country where I come from, when you look at, for instance, the newspapers circulation figures, one of the papers that has the highest circulation figures is called Bukede, and it's a local language newspaper. The language is actually called Luganda. The reason for that is these people have their culture. These people therefore identify with a medium that communicates to them directly, that communicates to their soul and spirit. And I think that as people that are interested in encouraging writing, but also encouraging the habit of writing across Africa, we need to explore some of these successes and benchmark and learn from them, so that we create books, we create materials that people can identify with, that people can use, that people can love, and therefore promote. I have also seen growing interest in publishing. And as the previous speaker mentioned, I think I've seen her display a lot of poetry books. So one of the areas that has a lot of interest, even here in Uganda, is publication of poetry especially in English. And this is interesting because we should also have poetry in the local languages. And I know that in Uganda, traditionally, we have some cultures that had poetry. In one of the parts of Uganda, it's called Okwevuga. And we would love to see some of these Kwevuga, these traditional poets also get published so that they can share and disseminate their culture and the knowledge that they share through Okwevuga across the continent and also across other cultures outside of Africa. Of course, we have a few people that are writing novels, and as I've said, some of these novels have performed very well on the global stage. Although my biggest issue is that some of the writers from Africa that perform so well on the global stage are unknown in their mother countries. This is a challenge that we have to deal with, so that our African writers are not only celebrated abroad, but also so that we can celebrate them locally within Africa and actually promote their books in all countries across Africa, have translations in Arabic, have translations in French, Portuguese, have translations in the different local languages across the continent, so that these writers really can truly influence Africans in all, everywhere that they are, or everywhere that they live. I would like to say that in Uganda specifically, I've observed a trend where there is growth in children's publishing, children's storybooks and so on. This is very encouraging because the time when I was growing up as a child, I was reading Ladybird books. And in a way, maybe that turned into a market for Western products. A lot of us don't think that, when we read these imported stories from elsewhere, the impact is far greater than, being able to speak the language fluently. The impact includes things like us desiring, for instance, certain products because we think maybe quality is associated with those products. So if we are to influence Africa on a global, on a big way, on a big scale, we have to think about what we write and how we write it and share the traditional values or values that would like to have reflected within Africa, so that our children, when they grow up, they appreciate local products, buy Africa, build Africa, because that's the only way. Otherwise, for many years, really, we never truly broke away from the chains of colonialism, and we should be able to break these chains. I would encourage the writers here to help us do that by writing interesting books, and books that speak about Africa, and books that show that, we're great people, we have a great destiny, and we can change, or the means of changing the continent is within us. Having worked in the field of literature for a long time, one of the challenges that I notice is the challenge of book distribution across the continent. It's only a few books that actually make it to different countries. Maybe all Africans, for instance, have read Chinua Achebe's book, and all the, those great writers of many years ago. But also the new writers, we have read quite a number, because the machinery behind, pushing these books across the continent has been quite devoted and quite huge. Many writers in Africa don't have that opportunity of having a big publisher behind them to push their book across the continent. So we need to take advantage. We need to find ways of how we can have, good quality books, even by writers that we don't know from the different countries, at least pushed across the different countries. Because I believe that these writers are doing an excellent job and want to tell the story to different Africans wherever they are. So the issue of book distribution is a huge challenge that we need to deal with. I would like to also say that when I started out, promoting books and promoting a culture of reading and so on, one of the issues that we noted was that most of the publishing that was happening in Africa was actually curriculum oriented. So anything outside of that, nothing was being done. So most of the publishers that we have on the continent, most of the investments in publishing they go to curriculum books. We have tried to talk to some of the publishers to say, okay, fine, you're doing a good job in the area of curriculum, but we also need these readers, we need the novels, we need the poetry, and all sorts of books, so that, because Africans are not only about reading and passing exams, that's a conversation that is still ongoing. I would like to say that we in Uganda have been doing something about, getting people to write other books, and there are many organizations that have devoting energy and resources to ensure that Africans write. One of them that I would like to mention on this forum is the Uganda Women's Writers Association, FemWrite. We have quite a number of publications that have come out, and some of them are read almost everywhere in Africa, which is a great thing. If they are not read by ordinary people, then they are read by university students. That is still good, that you're able to have a book that is read at university level. So we need initiatives like those to even get the men to write. I know that people in Kenya, in South Africa, in Nigeria, the obvious countries where we have some of the writers that write books that travel across boundaries. But also, we also would like authors from less known countries. I mean, from countries that do not ordinarily produce authors that write books that, get across the continent, so that they can get across the continent. I think one of the challenges also, apart from distribution, is the issue of language barriers. Probably we need to do something about translations and so on. And I know that in the developing world, there are even funds set aside for translation. In Africa, we don't have such opportunities, but maybe it is about time for us to begin to talk about funds that enable translations, so that we can have these stories translated into the different languages and read across the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, in my work, one of the challenges that came up, for instance, by 2010 was the issue of piracy. Piracy does not only affect school books, storybooks, it affects novels and so on. And nowadays, increasingly, I'm seeing that with the social media and the internet, a lot of our books are converted into PDFs and freely shared with the entire continent, and actually the entire world for free. The writers gain nothing. So then copyright becomes a big issue that we need to work on and be able to protect the writers, but also protect the entire value chain for books and publishing. And I would like to encourage the writers here, because some of the people here don't belong to these collective management organizations in your countries. These organizations are there. I've looked at the data. I think about 22 of the so many countries in Africa have a collective management organization for writers. That means we still have a long journey to go to ensure coverage, universal coverage for all Africans in terms of the collective management organizations. These organizations are very important in enforcing the copyright law, in enforcing the rights of authors. It's very difficult for you as a writer to enforce your copyright within your capital city, let alone enforcing the same right across the entire country, let alone enforcing the same right in the different countries, in Uganda, in Kenya, in all the 54 countries in Africa, and then the entire world. Because what we know is the books travel borders and rights, and give them to a collective management organization to manage those rights collectively, protect your rights, collect royalties for you, and distribute those royalties to the writers, but also receive royalties which are repatriated from other countries where these societies have reciprocal agreements. So just to encourage you, the writers here, that be concerned about the protection of your works and maybe being able to gain income from what you create. The income that you can get as a writer is beyond just sale of a physical book. Most of you know that you can only make money from selling a physical book, or when a TV company comes to you and they say, okay, we want to create a series out of a TV series out of your book. So then you can get adaptation rights, but the other rights, there's the right of reproduction and so many others. And it is difficult for us to keep, following you. So it's best if you join these societies. And in Uganda, the Uganda Reproduction Rights Organization is the collective management organization for literary writers. We've been doing a lot of work, even trying to protect the primary markets for books, because the issue of piracy, for example, somebody will produce the book and supply it through the same chain, distribution chain. So what we've been doing is working with police, the judiciary, and other people to ensure that writers' rights are respected, but also to ensure that there is compliance with the copyright law. So I really wanted to make that point. Then the other issue is probably what the moderator asked me, that how can writers rebrand Africa and so on. I think it's our duty actually as writers. Africa, when we look at the media, foreign media especially, Africa is branded differently. It's branded as a continent of lack, a continent of poverty, a continent where there is strife, where there is war, and so on and so forth. And I know that we can change this imagery of Africa to an Africa where there is plenty, an Africa where people are doing their very best and actually succeeding in creating change. And this we can achieve in the stories that the writers write. It would be absurd if we, the Africans that live in Africa, join the foreigners in condemning our continent or describing our continent in terms that other people have been describing the continent. It's our duty as writers to brand our continent differently. Somebody might say, but I'm not happy with the way my government is run or the way things are done in my country. Fine, that's a legitimate concern, but it doesn't mean that there are no individuals within your community that are doing something that is better than what government is doing. So we need to highlight these success stories that are happening so that the world at least is able to have an alternative voice that shows that Africa is actually a continent on the move, and a continent that is no longer a dark continent, but a continent that is making huge strides in terms of cultural development and in terms of the many things that we're able to do as Africans. One of the organizations where I'm very much I invest my effort is what we call the National Culture Forum. This organization has all people from the different creative arms as members. And what we are doing is us having a collective voice on the many issues that affect creatives. There's a lot of push and pull against creatives within Uganda, but also in other countries in Africa. Issues of markets, issues of freedoms of expression, issues of the monies, how much government is investing in creating the infrastructure for you to distribute your works or have your works performed and exhibited and so on. And all those issues, as an individual writer, it's very difficult for you to have a voice that moves government. So you need to work together as writers, as publishers, but also work together with other creatives from the other domains of art and culture, so that you can speak collectively about these issues and have them sorted by those who should sort them, and therefore be able to improve on what we are doing. I believe that as Africa and as writers in Africa and readers and all people, we need to continue writing. And I believe that we can change the status of Africa from being a silent continent to a very loud continent that is speaking and transmitting its values to the world. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charles. That was so insightful and inspiring and making us think. We have been thinking, I've been thinking from the presentation that you've been saying, like, yes, we have to be intentional about what we're doing, about our work. As you mentioned, some of the reading, I know some people throw this around when they say that you don't just become a writer, you're a reader first before you even go to write. So even as you look for our future generations of writers, we should give them the content which makes them celebrate us more than if you grow up reading news and buns. You want to read news and buns. If I write for you my new books, you're not going to like those ones. You want to read the stuff from outside there, not ours. How are we going to get people to read our stories? We need to start them young. And the trend for books for children is actually growing. I've noticed there's a couple of people who are doing that, and we should also support such type of initiatives for people. And Charles also mentioned about how we need like a collective voice for us to be able to have some of these spaces. Even Tony sort of mentioned something like that, like we need to have these sort of conversations and start these kind of things to go on. And as Afrobloggers, where we believe that every story matters, we encourage people to embrace their stories, to talk about their things, to publish, to write, to blog, to YouTube, to all of those things, to express yourself, because every story matters and you should not die with your story untold. Hi. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good, yeah.
So nice to speak to you. I thank all the presenters. Now, personally, I believe we are taking a great step as African literature is really having green lights ahead. And through on platforms, we are really it's really going to be a good time. We are going to make it more accessible and available, and it will reach different countries. That we shift to a virtual world. A good way to go is having virtual platforms. And working with a virtual online library, the Tumaini Pan-African Audiovisual Library. And I'll put the link in the group for anyone who is interested. For any, you have good books in your catalog, I invite you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so put the details in the chat. For those who would feel a bit shy about coming up and talk, just put your details in the chat. How do we get in touch with you? What are you doing? Even your blog, it is a great work of art. We want to learn more about it. What drove you to that? Why do you write? Why do we do those things? Why do we have these spaces? We have your hand. Just let me see. Is this? Hang on. Who am I calling through? Samantha. You want to come through and a few words?
Yeah, I was just going to make a suggestion, really. I mean, I think one of the things we could do is to work together collaboratively, especially with the Afrobloggers community, because I feel like there are a lot of you who are, you're dispersed in many different countries, and you guys can write. And one of the things I have done, and I think I've done it with you, Bitan, is to share some of the books I've published. And I'm very open to collaborating with more bloggers who might be interested in reading the books I publish. If you read them, write a review about them. That's one of the ways we could work together to amplify the voices of these new or emerging writers. So I'm open to sort of being approached, and I can send you books wherever you are if I can. And if you could write reviews and share them on your platforms, that would be an amazing way of working together and spreading the love for these new emerging African writers. That's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, beautiful stuff. And as you've heard, you put your details, right? Those will be in touch and will be coming through. And as I said, we're trying to also create like a resource for that where people can come through. Like you have new books coming out. If we've got reviewers, people who like to review, then you can actually have a list of people who are more for reviewing books. So you can actually even, the target market is perfect. Like, yeah, viewers. I know there are people who are actually into reviewing, like that's what they do mostly. The others who just like doing it. So we actually try and make sure we put this sort of resource in place where what you need, you want it reviewed, you want it edited, or you want it edited, then you want your books reviewed, you come to us and we direct it, and it moves on. So trying to just create cross-working across our and see where it takes us. Like I'm saying, this thing, we just talk of these things, but we don't know how it will blow up or how it will go, or how it will evolve. Other things can actually even come through. People asking, how do you actually make the money? But we can, using these platforms and these things we can establish, we can actually be our own people who help to make these things work.
Yeah.
Yes. I saw a hand up. I don't see it anymore. Does anyone just want to unmute themselves and say a few words? In the meantime, while we just...
So I think I wanted to respond to Janan's question, which he left in the chat, about how can the writing industry contribute towards rebranding the African continent. I think Charles mentioned a bit about it, and I just want to, I think, just add something on that. One of the things that some writers have been doing, and which we can continue to do, is definitely write good stories about Africa. And by writing good stories about Africa, it doesn't mean that don't limit yourself, really. Don't limit yourself. If you've read books by Jennifer Nansubuga-Makombi, I think for me, she's one of the Ugandan writers who are really doing so well in promoting the Ugandan culture, specifically Buganda, where she hails from. So I know if you've read her books, then you know a bit about what's happening or what the culture is about. And then for some of you who've read some Nigerian writers, Chimamanda with the Biafra War, if you've read Wole Soyinka, if you've read, what's his name, Chinua Achebe, many of those writers really write about things that are happening or were happening in their countries back in the day. And so writing has that space for to be able to tell stories about the continent, but tailoring them specifically to what they're experiencing. In that way, you give the wider audience insight into what's happening in your country. And then if you've read, I don't know if many of us have heard about Queen of Katwe, Fiona Mutesi and chess, and how that also blew up, and they came and filmed here most of the scenes in the book. And well, now Fiona is doing really well for herself, and I think she's done with school right now. She's finished university. But yeah, her story was able to put Uganda on the map, and people got to know that, Uganda is not just ravaged by poverty and all those other things that we get to see, but there's something great happening on the continent. So I think that's the place of writing, where people are able to tell the stories about their cultures, about what's happening in their everyday lives. There's that opportunity, stories that can, like Charles said, be transferred into, adapted to movies. So hopefully we get to have more of those. Yeah, and even I think, because we've been talking about writing generally, but I think even with blogging, that's an opportunity for bloggers who, if you want to tailor, I know there are people who tailor their content to that, taking us around their country and showing us what's happening in their countries. There's also opportunities for bloggers to do that on their blogs. Really take us into your country and just show us what's happening. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Tony, do you have a few words to leave us with?
I'm thankful for all the panelists for what they have shared. Thank you so much. Answering Jonathan's question, I think it's purely up to the step one, which is converting this into something joyous. Meant subconsciously, it's still attached to a core without knowing. So until, mainly basically out of the education system, what we usually go through. So the first step is having such communities, which turns it into a joy subconsciously. That's going to turn everything around. It's because what we are discussing, we have discussed a lot of things, but we haven't discussed the subconscious effect and how it will either turn around, how whatever we are doing can be blocked subconsciously. So that's my closing remark. And thank you once again, Beaton. And
thank you for joining us. It's a lovely session. And guys, if I can just ask you to indulge me to just turn on your camera so I can do a group selfie, just so we can let me stop recording because we are finished.